All right, here we go. Okay, so this is our Rio TLAP meeting number 3. And so we're going to be talking about the hooks and the engagement part of our book this time. And we have a ridiculously super awesome guest. I'm so excited, and I'm going to let Mr. Hughes introduce himself. Good morning.
Hey, good morning. So my name is Keith Hughes. My nickname online is Hip Hughes. I've worked in the Buffalo public school system for 16 years now, 15 as a history teacher, AP Gov. Last year I took a tech coaching position, so I work mainly with elementary school kids, integrating technology. I'm an adjunct professor at the University of Buffalo. I run a channel called Hip Hughes History, and I'm cray-cray for the learning.
I love it. I love it. And Miss Danelle, introduce yourself, please.
My name is Danelle Lagomarsino, and I teach 6th grade. I'm going to start my 13th year, 6th grade at Rural Vista Middle School. I taught with Miss Legaspi back in the day at Real Del Norte. I taught 4th, then I taught 5th for maybe a couple months, and then they moved me to 6th. So it's going to be my 6th year in middle school.
Awesome. Thank you, Ms. Danelle. So basically, again, we're just going to talk about engagement and hooking those kids. And, you know, the very beginning quote in that chapter said something, it said, "A good teacher, like a good entertainer, first must hold his audience attention, then he can teach his lesson." So like we've talked about, and that's, you know, sort of teaching 101. If you don't have their attention, you're not going to teach them anything. So again, I'm super excited that we have a master of this with us, with Mr. Hip Hughes. And so one of the things, and I know you have some opinions on this, that's why I kind of want to shoot it out to you, Mr. Hughes. In the book, it talks about that no content standard, any grade, any subject, it doesn't matter, is more important than nurturing and building a love of learning. So I know you talk about this quite a bit, and this is something that is very dear to you as far as your teaching passion. So what can you expand on as far as that?
I think a lot of our pedagogy and like the paradigm of our teaching world comes from our own experiences as we went through school. So at the time it might have been unfortunately, but fortunately today I had a terrible schooling experience. So a lot of boring hours staring at walls, thinking of ways to annoy the teacher and how to get through. So I always kind of went into teaching thinking that it was a big game, that it didn't need to be like that. That developing authenticity and creating an atmosphere where learning wasn't just embodied in a natural act was always my goal. So early on when I was teaching, probably my 1st or 2nd year, I actually hooked up with a program through the University of Buffalo called City Voices, City Visions. And I ended up running that program, but basically it was a digital video production program where we trained teachers in the art of digital storytelling in order to pass it on to their kids. And it was through that experience that I really learned the difference between the knowledge piece and the acquisition piece. And that if we were just doing the knowledge piece, that was killing children's souls. And it was killing their desire to learn, or what they thought learning was. I don't know if it was so much a desire as their own paradigm, like I went through school. So once I started doing production and I started understanding the difference between acquiring skills and passing on knowledge, I really, I think, developed myself into a master teacher. The traditional literacy pieces, the ones that we were always so concerned about, we were always so concerned about putting, like you said, standards on the wall, and children will learn how to dance in a circle and do their dance. Whatever the heck it was. That was always being taught through this very traditional lens, and even in a tech world, it was being done, in my viewpoint, through a traditional literacy paradigm. So being able to develop product-based learning where the traditional pieces flowed authentically through the art of creation was kind of my secret moment when I learned that it really wasn't about me. It was about kids and learning. It wasn't about me being the teacher and teaching. So I don't know if that makes any sense.
It absolutely makes a lot of sense. One of the things that I discovered with our district has kind of jumped in to tech, but it's really only been the last couple of years that, you know, the majority of our students have had some kind of device to use. And that has completely changed my whole way of teaching. You know, I mean, I was always kind of that teacher that was sort of off, you know, to the edge, that wasn't the traditional, you know, that didn't do the things more everybody else did. But with tech, it just completely changed how I do things. You know, the old way, like you talked about, you know, you write your objective on the board so your principal can walk in, supposedly figure out what it is you were teaching. Like, they couldn't figure out what you were teaching if you didn't have it written on the board, really? You know.
A really funny story. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Good.
Eventually I left the classroom, and I have a video called Data Killed the Video Star, the Teacher Star, about why I left the classroom. But kind of the moment where I kind of had an aha moment, I was like, I don't know if this is going to work out, was when they started doing their walkthroughs with their huge fancy rubrics, and on one of their little dots was that you had to have the learning objective on the wall. And I just kind of never did that. and when they gave me my unsatisfactory and they were showing me, and I said, well, what if I don't want to put the objective on the wall because it's part of the lesson? What if part of the lesson is kind of the surprise, that moment of learning, that magic when that occurs? And they kind of just looked at me kind of like, it's on the rubric.
No. No.
Yeah, and again, and back to the point of what you're saying, it's not just about the tech, and I think that you understand this obviously as well. I think half of it is that new literacy piece, that production piece, that authentic embodied learning piece, but the other half is us, obviously. Is creating that energy, and like you started off the conversation, my quote is, where attention goes, energy flows.
I love
You're teaching that attention, you might as well just be flapping your wings and playing 7-Up with the kids. So I think it's a good mix of pedagogy, smart pedagogy, and production, and bringing ourselves into the classroom in our own extraordinary ways.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, it's, you know, it's being able to have freedom that was never there before. You know, you've always had those curious kids, you know, who've come to you and who've said, you know, okay, well, what is it that makes a volcano erupt? You know, whereas before the tech, before when you just had your textbooks in the room, you know, you couldn't really say, you know what, that's a really good question. Why don't you go figure that out? Go right over there. I mean, you couldn't do that without the tech. You know, they were constantly looking at the teacher to be that deliverer of information, and it was really difficult, I should say, to try to get that curiosity piece going and to get them to be a little bit more of a self-motivated learner. You know, with the tech, I have kids that I was just playing around over spring break, honestly, and I shot out a video because I discovered a new video app and I was so excited. So I just was playing with it, and I made this little, you know, volcano, here what it is. A volcano isn't even in my curriculum, but I just did it because it was like, kids love volcanoes, and it's spring break, so who cares? And so I sent it out to them, and I literally had half my class researching volcanoes because they thought it was fun, you know, and they wanted to come back and share. And that was so, it was just so ridiculously awesome to think, oh my gosh, here are these kids with just a little nudge are going to go out and spend their home time looking up stuff and making things and wanting to email me back and say, look what I made, this is what I made. So before the tech, it was never that easy as far as saying, you know, go figure that out and then come back in and let me know. It was just really difficult, along with, like you said, when you have administrators walking through your room with the clipboards and wanting to see whatever the, you know, the objective today, we're learning synonyms, you know, and you can do synonyms on worksheets for, you know, 3.5 years and they still won't understand synonyms. But yeah, with tech and the way that things are going, we also have a wonderful superintendent who really likes project-based learning and inquiry-based design, and is really kind of pushing people to go out of the box. You know, you don't have to stay in the box anymore. You know, he's like, it's okay. And so it's really kind of neat. One of the things I would love for you to share is your DV quilt that you have developed.
Sure. I previously had mentioned, you know, kind of the video production piece that I was doing, and I was still doing full video production every year, probably 3 or 4 projects of 1-minute movie trailers or public service announcements or, you know, whatever. Genre is really important to me because genre is something that kids can understand and can fall into. It was always the vehicle for me kind of to drive the learning. But it took a long time. And as a social studies teacher, you know, back to that content piece, I was still responsible for getting across a heck of a lot of vocabulary words and stuff like that. So we were really searching for ways to bring in video production into the classroom, so it was faster, basically. Kids' brains work different today than they did 20 years ago. Our kids, the millennial generation, have grown up in a multimodal world, so their brains just work differently. So it was really always important to me not only to bring in, you know, multimodality, new literacies through audio and visual, but acting and body movement and that experience, because that's what kids remember. I've had kids, you know, I'm sure we all do when we go to the store and here comes some 34-year-old walking at you and you're like, oh crap, I think I I taught that man, you know. And this actually happened a couple of weeks ago. One of the first videos I did was called Wings of Hope. It was the 9/11 video after 9/11. And this is, you know, so what, I don't know, 14 years ago or whatever. And the kid comes up to me, he goes, Mr. Hughes, do you remember me? And I'm like, yeah, hey, you. You know, I don't remember.
Yeah.
And he goes, I was the guy who got that shot in Wings of Hope. Remember when we're walking down the stairs? And I kind of, in my head, I went, all of his schooling, you know, with 13 years of formal schooling, and what does this kid remember? He remembers the shot he took with the camera. So it shows the power of video, the power of production. So what the quilt was, kind of to get into it, was basically I would create the beginning and the end of a video. So if I was going to do an info commercial on, you know, reasons why the Civil War started, I can do it. I can fake it really quick. I like doing this. Right?
I love this. Yep.
Hey kids, don't understand why the Civil War happened, but we have the perfect product for you. It's a DVD created for kids. For kids. So let's check it out as these guys explain why the Civil War happened. Right. So then we would just kind of layer titles. We would assign with a rubric, with a traditional literacy piece. So the kids were researching and writing and doing graphic organizing and doing those traditional pieces, but with purpose, because they could see that that end objective was creation, was something that was going to exist in the world that went beyond their locker or their desk. And the kids loved it, and they always remembered whatever they filmed, and we would use the products to review, and it would take 2 days. And we would have a finished product. So that methodology, that best practice, can be really used. I've done it with third graders. I've done it with graduate students. It really is transferable, and it's a great motivator. It's a great thing to do in the beginning of the year. I used to do it on day 1 or 2 because I didn't want to be the teacher that was handing out rules on the first week.
Oh, I love that you said that. I absolutely love that you said that. I'm sorry, Danelle, you're just kind of sitting over there being pretty. I'm sorry. But I love that you talked about the first day of school, because that's one of the things I want to ask you about. You know, one of the things that I kind of want to, in my little humble, you know, third grade teacher way, I want to try to get more teachers to ditch the rules on the first day of school. And so I would love for you to talk some more about what was your first day of school like.
Yeah, I did a project called America Is, and it was a little DV quilt where I would just create the beginning titles of America Is, and we would just talk about what it means to be a citizen. And I would just get the kids to try to write a full sentence, America Is, and to express whatever they wanted to express, to have some kind of ownership. I think it's really important that the kids feel like their identity counts that in your class, and it has to be done early on, or you're going to create that relationship of you know, me being up here and you being down there. Creation has a way of just, you know, naturally developing into a cooperative endeavor where they're as important in the project as I am. So doing something production orientated the first couple days, getting the kids excited, playing some music, having fun visuals on the wall. School sucks for a lot of kids, and you know, I'm coming from the upper end, so 11th and 12th grade, there's many more kids that are pissed than probably in third grade.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, in my district, I look through the elementary school rooms when I walk by, and you can see kind of the souls just floating through the kids' eyes, out their ears, because they're doing modules and scripted learning and worksheets and following directions. So anything that we can do in the beginning of the year to create that paradigm where they want to come, where they're excited to be there, then you have that button for engagement that's available for you for the rest of the year. But if you're going to drown them with rules and with authority and with, you know, all of the no smiling until Christmas crap, you're going to create a paradigm of kids who, if anything, might submit to you, but they certainly probably won't have powerful learning experiences.
Not at all. Danelle, what kind of things what is your first day of school philosophy?
Well, I don't really give them a syllabus because most of the teachers in the middle school have like syllabus with supplies and rules and things. I kind of basically, I like the idea with the whole Play-Doh idea that Dave Burgess mentioned, where kids can create something that represents them. So I actually went to the 99-cent store last week and I got a whole little class set of Play-Doh. So I thought that might be kind of fun for them, rather than just making name tags, or I've done like, student interest inventory, see what they're interested in. I've done like classmate bingo, and I have them for 2 periods. So like I teach language arts and social studies, so it's the same group of students. And then they leave to math and science, and then I get a new group. So I get a couple hours with them, so that makes it nice. But basically, I don't really give them rules. I make them come up with the rules, and then we kind of decide as a class what are some of the expectations that we're going to follow. But in the past, when I first started, I had rules, and this is how they're going to behave. But over time, you kind of realize that they kind of fight against that. So rather than having them just hear the rules, I kind of let them come up with in terms of how are we supposed to behave at school? What are expectations? And then I kind of go that way to kind of build them in, and then they create their own posters with expectations for their class. Just basically kind of like getting them up out of the classroom, a little name activities I'll try to do, like, because, I have to memorize like 30-something names in each period. Most of them are the same kids in the 2 groups, but that's like 60 kids plus my elective, so that's a lot of kids that I'm supposed to try to remember everyone's name. So I just basically, the first 2 days is like getting to know the students. And then I'll do like pictures of my family or all the animals I have on my little mini farm, and but I'm not really into here's what the rules are for my classroom. But mostly, and we've done puzzles and things like that. So my philosophy is kind of like getting to know them getting to know me, as well as learning how to work with each other. So that's
I find even with 3rd graders, they know what the rules are already. Yeah. I don't need to stand there and say, don't do this, don't do that, sit down. They, it just isn't. They know what they're supposed to do anyway, and like you talked about, I don't want that kind of a class anyway. I don't want them all sitting there staring at me and, somebody, if you need a drink, go get a drink. I don't care. Just don't bug me or anybody else on the way. Go for it. If you need a pencil, figure it out, because I'm not going to pull one out for you. You find one, you figure it out. So they know.
Yeah, it's interesting to see, though, like they expect that. Like they come from elementary school, so, it's their first year in middle school, and they expect like worksheets, or they expect, what are we going to do? I want to, like where I'll have them create or, slides or presentations, and some of them rather just have a worksheet, or they rather just have a quiz. And I'm like, no, your quiz is to make a song with your information. And so just kind of taking them into thinking differently is quite interesting to see, because they're used to worksheets or packets, and I'm not saying all of them are used to that, because I know a lot of teachers are also thinking outside the box and getting kids engaged, but you do see some of them really they want you to kind of spoon feed them.
Oh, goodness gracious, yes.
Well, where can I go to find that answer? What do I do with that information? So trying to just get them to think in a different way, as well as for myself to think in a different way also. It's kind of a cool thing to see, that we're both kind of changing our views.
When I was in the 3rd grade last year, I did 3rd, 4th, and 5th at a couple schools. And I recognize this in the high school too, but I mean, I've seen the effect of rigor. I mean, I've seen the effect of scripted learning, and exactly what you're saying. Kids, what do you want me to do?
Yeah.
What do I do next, or where do I find that? And I think it's a direct result of kind of the standards movement and the accountability movement and the testing movement, and whatever you want to call it. And I agree, not everybody is doing that, but a heck of a lot of teachers are doing that. I always use this measure: how many authentic decisions did my kid make today? If the kid is making decisions that count, then there's probably an opportunity for learning. But if they're being, like you said, told, You know, you're not learning in the space between my mouth and your ear, that's for sure. So anytime that we can get our kids to make decisions that count, I think that's a good objective.
Oh, I believe that 100%. With my third graders last year, and I think, and again, I keep relating it to the tech, and just in that, because the tech has freed me quite a bit to really kind of teach the way I've always wanted to teach anyway. But yeah, with my third graders, it took me at least half the year, if not more, like 3/4 of the year, just to get them to say, you know how to solve that problem. Okay, here's what we're going to do today, here's how we're going to do it, here are the materials you need, go. You know, and you still have those few that are sitting there like, am I supposed to get up and get paper? What am I, you know, but it's exactly what you just got through saying, Keith, is that they are so, I think teachers have been so pressured into fitting in everything they're supposed to fit in that one day to make it to that end goal, which is the test, that they don't allow for any kind of, like you just got through saying, authentic decision making. You know, the kids can't do it when they come to me, and I mean, I get them at third grade, and so they've had, you know, kinder first and second, where they've kind of had that all beaten out of them. No, you can't get up. No, you can't talk. Here's your next worksheet. You know, yes, now your name right there. Put your name right there in that spot. I mean, they're so spoon-fed that I can't even imagine what they're like by the time they get to middle school and even high school, you know, if they've just had that constant, basically the curiosity beat out of them. You know, there's no room for them to say, I have a question. It's not even related to what we're doing, but, you know, it's something I'm really curious about. You know, I want them to ask questions on that, even that very first day of school. Come ask me something. Give it to me. Let's go. Something, if you wouldn't mind, Mr. Hughes, talking a little bit about one of your, I think it was one of your flipping videos, and I think you even mentioned it on your DV quilt video. Talk to us about the tech that you use to create those DV quilts. You know, I mean, some of us thinking, you know, oh, look, you know, he's got his own YouTube channel, and he's spiffy, and he's got all the equipment.
Right. No, absolutely. Yeah, and absolutely, you can't. The most important, I think, lesson in tech is do it no matter what, no matter what your access point is. And you can do this with an iPhone and internet access. You don't even really need software at this point or a fancy camera. I was using WeVideo even to do it on the fly at this point. So if you do go to wevideo.com, very simple to use. You can take shots with your phone. Take a beginning shot and an end shot. You can even just put titles up if you're uncomfortable being on camera and acting and being, you know, silly like me. Just titles that, you know, with a little music, you know. I think that if you experiment and you play is a super verb of learning, you're going to get there. But you need to give yourself that time to have fun and to make something yourself. In the graduate courses that I teach, I do very little theory. I do some theory just so I don't get fired, but for the most part, I'm trying to get people to produce so they can feel what I want my kids to feel, which is this sense of excitement and this sense of I'm making something that I own, that I want to be, you know, good. And I'd always go up to the graduate students and I go, you know, you've been spending 14 hours on that video, you know, aren't you done yet? And they'd be like, I'll never be done, because they had so much ownership over that final product. Once they go through that experience, it's like a virus. You have to pass it on. So I would say, you know, get into play mode, get into Xbox mode, experiment. I know there's a lot of great people out there. One of my favorites is Free Tech for Teachers, Rich Byrne, who puts out, you know, so much content in terms of tech stuff that is just, I don't know how the boy does it, but you know, going on his site once a week and picking something and just saying, well, I'm going to play with that for an hour. You know, you'll build your toolbox, your tech toolbox or tool belt quite quickly that way.
Yes, oh, he's awesome. I love him. We've also been fortunate to have Alice Keeler come and talk to our district 3 times now, I think. So she's an awesome resource too.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so yeah, I love it. The point kind of being is, you know, we our teachers have all been given an iPad. So you know, just to kind of say,
on the iPad. What are you talking about? Movie.
Exactly. So that was kind of what I wanted you to get at. You know, we all have an iPad. So if nothing else, we have an iPad. And the kids love to be on video. You know, we are like, oh no, don't look at me. Oh, But the kids they love to be on video, and they'll ask, we made several videos last year, and they will ask, I want the link to the video Miss Legaspi so I can go home and show it to my mom, or I want to watch it again, or, show us that one again, so they love to see themselves on video.
And not even just because not every single kid wants to be on video, but the awesome thing about video production is it's just natural differentiation. They throw all these key words at us all the time. What the hell do they mean? They want us to differentiate and yada, yada, yada. But that's exactly what it is. They're all producing something, but there's a spot for the actor and the producer and the editor and the cameraman and the writer and the reader and the group guy, and there's just all these natural spots that aren't forced. Like sometimes we do that when we try to differentiate, and make kids feel as though they're not doing what everybody else is doing. This is a natural productory act that I think hits all of the standards and anybody can do.
Awesome. Well, if you have a couple of more minutes, thoughts on getting kids to be creative, or even getting teachers to be creative, because a lot of times both teachers and adults have this kind of block. I'm not creative in any way. I can't. But one of the big messages in Burgess's book is that you can be creative. It is a skill that you can work on and develop. And even kids, I'll say, go and make something. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about. They feel like they can't. So talk to me a little bit about how you help kids be creative.
I think there's a couple things that you can do. I think number one is rubrics, and I know that rubrics can be a turn off when you hear it, and certainly I was never the biggest fan of rubrics, but a smartly developed rubric that's being used to facilitate that learning experience, to give kids empowerment to make those decisions rather than being a mechanism to grade, I think can be a great ally in the classroom. So a lot of kids won't know that they have the choice when they're creating a video to put in sound effects, or to use an accent on their voice, or to use a different angle on the camera, or whatever, because they haven't had that experience. But if you put it on the rubric, then they at least are thinking about it. They're giving that choice. Oh, I can move the camera. Oh, I can use an accent. And that's just a small example. But I think that we can be there to facilitate that creativity. Through that mechanism. And then the other one is just allow kids to make mistakes, and allow yourself to make mistakes. Be goofy, be silly. They emulate a lot of times the energy that you're creating in the classroom. So when they see you being creative and trying different things and making mistakes and being a goofball, and all with a sense of purpose, it gives them kind of silent permission to do the same thing. So I would say, with a rubric and with your attitude and with the choices that you're bringing to them, the smorgasbord, the buffet that you put in front of them, and that's that rubric, I think can be a great facilitator.
Awesome. Danelle, any questions, anything that you can think of that you want to ask while we're still here?
No, I don't really have anything to ask, but just going along that thought with rubrics, it's funny because like I had my students make, because I teach hunters and gatherers at the beginning of the school year, and it's not really my most exciting type of topic. Yeah, Lucy, so I thought of, using that song, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. And so I had the students, we researched information about hunters and gatherers, and then they had to make these songs. And so they made them on a program we have, because all of my students have we have a class set of computers.
I'm gonna get my plug.
So it's funny how you give them a rubric, and then they ask question after question, like, can I do this? Can I do that? Can I add this to it? And it's like, yeah, you could do whatever you want. So it's interesting to see when you give kids that creative aspect, they sometimes don't know is it okay to be creative? And so that whole idea of letting them, and then we had them, they did, Google presentations, and I gave them rubrics. And then I let them have the ability to pick, like, do they want to do a presentation? Do they want to do a song? So giving them that leeway, it's just kind of interesting that they're engaged. Like, I didn't really have behavior problems. I didn't, they were excited to share. And I use Google Classroom, so we would put the links on there so they can always have access to different videos. And then when I had kids do idiom plays, we recorded each other so they were able to see themselves. And so I just think it's kind of cool that giving them that creative ability, but they're not used to it, as I see when they come to 6th grade. That's why they're always asking me questions and giving them that freedom. Sometimes they don't know what to do with it at the beginning of the year, but then by the end of the year, you see some cool finished products that they're able to, always have and to share with others. So
I think teachers need to recognize the fact that if they're teaching traditionally and they're good at authority and the kids are all quiet, that means nothing. There's probably a good chance that 80% of your kids are, doing mental exercises of futility in your head as you're talking with them. The only difference of doing production is instead of 80% not being tuned in, 80% are being tuned in, but the other 20% are louder. The other 2 kids or whatever are being knuckleheads, and they're maybe being, having conversations they shouldn't be having or whatever. There's a little bit of chaos in the corner. But if you mentally balance that between the 80% who are doing it in their heads when you're standing in front of the room, as opposed to the 20% of knuckleheads that might not be, fully participating in a productory scenario, it's not even a question of which one is more powerful. It's just that from a visual standpoint, if you're walking by the room, an administrator might go, what the heck is going on in there? And then I would say that's what learning sounds like. But still the same, you have to be prepared that, it is a little bit messy. Doing this type of teaching can be a little bit chaotic. It's a little bit, not clean. But so goes life.
Exactly. And I think there's always this fear that if I let them go, I'll never get them back. But just like you had talked about, and Danelle, you even had said it, when you do this kind of teaching and learning, and when the kids are doing stuff and they're talking and they're discussing and they're making and creating, it's loud and it looks like they're just wandering all over the room. But like you'd said, you have just about all of them all in, and you never get that with traditional. Okay, turn to page 82. Yesterday we did page 81. Now we need to do page 82, and you're going to do the odd numbers today. Exactly. Like you said, you have maybe 2 kids paying attention when you're doing that. But when there's some kind of something that they can create and make, and you had said it, and I've heard it in many different places, you were so right with the way these kids think today. They don't think like us. They don't, I took a picture, my teenager was mad at me, but I took a picture of my 14-year-old. He's sitting playing a game. So he's got the big screen TV, he's taken that over. So he's playing his game. He's got his iPhone. He's got his iPad. He's got a laptop all right there with him. And I'm looking at him and I was bugging him and I'm like, really? How many devices do you need? Are you kidding me? But then when I'm looking and he's explaining to me what he's doing, he's on his game, and it's one of the games that they play where they all chat, and they play together, and they talk to people. And he's got his iPhone and he's texting his friend who's playing with him because they're strategizing the game. He's got his iPad on a video, like a how-to, how to beat this level, whatever that was. And then his laptop, they're streaming their play so that they can talk about it and look at it later. So when you look at it that way and you pull it apart and you're like, oh my gosh, that's how these kids think. It's like they want to know something. I want to know it now. YouTube it. Look it up. And so it's something that you had said, and I'd like you maybe to end, I think it would be a good way to end our time, is talking about these kids are not just consuming media. They should be, making it, creating it. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite quotes is, kids have to stop eating content and they have to start cooking content.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, those of us who are concerned about tests and data and rigor and college career readiness, I think they're missing the mark, because when you do this smartly, that stuff gets built in. The rigor and the research and the writing and those skills that kids need to be done within the confines of something that's authentic. And it can be done, it just takes a different role for us. I started calling myself a FOL, which is a little bit creepy, but that's a facilitator of learning experiences, because I'll end with this, because I don't know what the hell a teacher does. but I know what a facilitator of learning experiences does. So I'll leave it at that.
Awesome. Oh, and again, thank you so much for
Well,
joining
thanks
us.
for having me.
I'm still completely floored that you took a little bit of time out of your day to join us. Thank you so much. And thank you, Danelle. Say bye, Danelle.
Thanks. Nice to meet you.
And
Right.
thank you. So everyone's goal, you are to plan your first day of school without rules. No rules. First day of school. There's 179 other days that you can talk about rules if you really want to. So here's your homework. Go figure out your first day of school where you do not talk about rules. So again, thank you, Mr. Hughes. Thank you,
See
Danelle.
you.
You're welcome.
All right. Looking forward to riding the Twitters with you all. Bye-bye.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.